Few steps, big gains, and completely different concept coming from the Mercedes squad. Some news on that, and what are my personal thoughts with this Mercedes team. The W14 is going to get a completely different overhaul, which is good. We do know that this car is lacking everything practically, but with a good Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. Let's talk about that at first. Saudi Arabia was actually a pretty successful Grand Prix, in my opinion, for that Mercedes squad, with only being 30 seconds behind the Red Bull, which might sound like a lot, but it really isn't. Could be even a 4 or 5 tenths difference really per lap time, which can be gained within a couple of Grand Prix if the right upgrades come. The cars were pretty competitive and actually beat Ferrari big time. They weren't able to compete with the Aston Martins, and that's probably to do with their actual lacking of downforce on the rear end. They still lack that car sticking into the ground and really need to make a car that just is planted into the ground. The straight line speed is better, but not as great as something like a Red Bull, which just shreds drag. This car is still performing with a lot of drag and really just as draggy as the Aston Martin car, maybe a tad bit better. But big steps are being found, and Toto Wolff speaks about it. The whole concept changing from the underfloor to the top aero. They are changing, like Aston Martin talked about in the beginning of their season, 95% of their car at the very minimum. And huge upgrades are coming. They're finding performance they weren't finding before. If we remember correctly, the big upgrade that was coming to Imola for the W14 that was talked about for them being like, oh, this is a huge, massive upgrade coming before they were doing this huge overhaul, they said it was a 3 tenths gain. That was their big gain. I mean, that would put them nowhere close to Red Bull. So now they're doing that complete overhaul. But if he calls that a big gain in the beginning of the season, and now they're finding numbers that they have never found in the wind tunnel since they've started the 2022 era of cars, some big numbers are coming. And I'm going to take a guess and say that it's probably over a second of time. I mean, we remember hearing Ferrari gaining over a second on really their 2022 car, which is far from the truth. They've gotten worse, clearly. Mercedes is already at the same step as the W13, and actually, this Saudi Arabian Grand Prix was better than their Saudi Arabian Grand Prix last year. They were way further behind and literally in dead man's land last year, not even being able to compete whatsoever with the Red Bull cars. Before I get deeper into this video, thank you all so much for the support. I mean, you guys are amazing. The love for this channel is amazing. And thank you guys all for commenting and always really sharing your guys' feedback. And for the people that aren't subscribed and like, please do subscribe and like and hit that notification bell. I'm practically uploading every single day. I thank all of you very much. And let's get into this Mercedes video. Toto, like I said, talked about much bigger than we've had in a very long time. These steps, these tenths that they're gaining into the wind tunnel.
Development trajectory goes in the right direction, but then on the flip side, we want to hopefully race for wins soon.
He even talked about the car being like, hey, listen, if this looks like a Red Bull, but it's fast, I don't care. My pride won't get hurt. Which I like this mentality. And Mercedes has always been that team to have that mentality. They don't really care how their car looks as long as it's fast. I mean, look at the W13. That thing was hideous. But the actual car itself was pretty decent. But obviously they wanted a way faster car. And the whole entire 2022 complaining about the car gaining not as much performance as they wanted it and it not being fast. Like, it did look ugly, but they didn't get that performance. And that was Toto Wolff's biggest thing. And the whole entire talk about putting the car in the display and that being like, look, this is a car we tried with, but it didn't get anywhere. Now this year, clearly the W14 isn't as bad as the W13. It's different in the way that it performs. It doesn't bounce as much, but it's lacking downforce. He talks about the big steps being relative, and what they've done with the W14 that we are looking at right now from Bahrain to Saudi Arabia is a completely different approach. They're taking the car, they're looking at it from a different perspective. That is the biggest thing that they talk about, that it's not as simple as it looks like, and they should have been looking at it like this from the start of the 2022 season, and now the gains are a lot bigger than what they were looking at. They say they've unlocked some potential for the actual W14 car. That is the biggest thing that they really mention in these articles, and what Toto Wolff talks about is, in Bahrain, they weren't able to unlock that potential. They took a different perspective for Saudi Arabia, and that's where they unlocked it. I mean, the strategy call with Lewis starting on the hards, I think would have worked a lot better if the race went on for a lot longer and there wasn't that safety car, was it lap 19 or 20? That didn't really work into their favor because the car coming out and there being a safety car there takes the whole purpose away from the hard tires needing to last for a very long period of time. It put Lewis on the mediums very quickly. It did make him go through the field and catch those Ferraris in an instant, but it then put him behind Russell, and I think through team orders, they just kept him behind, and the car wasn't able to actually extract its full performance. We did see that the car became a lot more alive on those mediums than the hards, which is another thing though. They gotta work on actually being able to heat up the tire and making sure that those hards perform. Alonso in his Aston Martin was very happy with the hard tire. Same with Red Bulls. That is the hardest compound tire we have during each race. So if Mercedes isn't able to extract that performance out of the hard tire, they will struggle because the hard tire is used on almost every single track, practically, and will be used in even the Australian Grand Prix. He said that originally Toto Wolff's quotes were, "We got to take a couple steps back to take a step forward." Now he's changed his wording and said, "We took no steps back, and now it was just immediately 2 steps forward with their different perspective." Now we do know that Mercedes has been talking a lot, which I'm not a huge fan of. I want them to be more in the interest of showing it on the field rather than talking to the media about everything that's happening with this Mercedes car. Am I a fan of them having this different confidence and motivation? Of course I am. I want Mercedes to be back in the fight. I would love to see Lewis Hamilton be an 8-time world champion. There's no debate around that. I do love Lewis Hamilton, and I think it'd be great to see him. Do I like other people just as much? I do. I think Max is amazing. I think Red Bull is amazing. But I do think that Mercedes, when they're in the title fight and when there's more cars fighting for the title, it's a lot more entertaining. And this 2023 battle will get very interesting very quickly. With reliability issues coming at Red Bull, Mercedes, we know, will not be an unreliable car. They're always reliable. I can't remember a year where the Mercedes car actually failed in like really anything or engine based. Those engines are extremely durable and fast. And the cars have already proven that they can be pretty quick on the straights and actually have a lot of speed. Aerodynamic efficiency is very important in these new era of cars. A lot of people talk about the engines, but I actually think that the more efficient these cars are on its aero, the faster they are. The Red Bull has no drag. The Aston Martin has full-time drag, and losing almost 10 kilometers per hour to the Red Bull. Mercedes, on the other hand, is losing about 8 kilometers per hour to the Red Bull in DRS zones, or really just even being behind it in qualifying gaps that we see in the speed traps. Obviously, the drag is important, and I actually think that some part of it has to do with those side pods. And I'm thinking that they're already going to go for some huge undercut side pods, just like really any team that's at the top right now is doing, with the exception of really Ferrari. They don't have huge undercuts, but Red Bull and Aston Martin do. Setup is a big thing that a lot of teams talk about, and really finding that window. The funny thing we always make fun of with really George Russell is always one that's like, we gotta find the sweet spot in the window. But Mercedes is known to always talk about those types of things. And really with this Mercedes car, their setup window is small. With the car not having the downforce that they wanted to, they have to set it up in a specific way. We already see an unconfident Lewis Hamilton in his W14 because he can't really set up the car properly to how he would like to. He says in the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, if I was able to set it up like George, I'd be just as fast, but I wasn't able to set up the car that way. I'm wondering if they took a different approach to see how good the car would perform. Are they testing on Lewis again? I don't think so. I don't think there's much to test like they did with W13, but setup is important, and if you can't extract the full performance out of the car, if you're losing in spots where your teammate is gaining, then you do have the worse setup, which clearly is a big thing that is really focal pointed and outlined in these articles. Is we need a bigger setup window to get that car in the sweet spot in more tracks than just one. Like last year it was Brazil and even Mexico where the car was performing at its highest. They need to be able to perform on a lot higher amount of tracks. And they already say by the time this new car comes out, they can be fighting for race wins. And this 2023 isn't over. I fully believe that. The Red Bull is ahead right now, but teams will catch up to that Red Bull. 2023 is just starting. We're really only into the second race of the season. Keep that in mind. It is a 23 race season. We have had a minimum 21 more races, with some sprints where points are also gained there. What do we have, 6 sprints this year? Yeah, I mean, like, there is so much potential for gain, and this Mercedes team, is not just being foolishly optimistic, as they say. They are very happy with what's coming out, and I would expect a completely different Mercedes coming out pretty soon. Everything will be different on this Mercedes. The rear wing, the beam wing, literally anything visually we can see, but including the floor under, which was talked about in my last video, and I mentioned how the floor is probably the biggest reason as to why they aren't really gaining where they need to be gaining. It'll be turned upside down. Those are the biggest things talked about. That's all I really have for you guys today. There isn't much more on Mercedes that we can speak about. I think as these races come apart, we will be able to see more and more and more about this W14 and really the B spec that's going to come out and where these performance gains will be really shown. As of right now, they gained what they could in Saudi Arabia. The car was better. They weren't as far from Red Bull, and I do believe that there's more potential. They even said that they were holding back for some of the race just because catching the Aston Martins wasn't as important. They just needed to stay within that 5-second gap. So leave your thoughts down below. Leave a like, subscribe. It would mean the world, and peace.